This is Golden Doves class 203. We're page 123. Derasha and Mesira. In rabbinic tradition, the derasha is a legal institution pertaining to all written documents, meaning people like to think of derasha as somehow idiosyncratic to the Chumash, and we do derashot on the Chumash. That's not entirely true. Any legal document that is deposited with the Bet Din, the Dayanim will read the document and, where necessary, interpret the document. This institution is connected with the expression Leshon Hediot, the language of a commoner, in opposition to Leshon HaKodesh, sacred language, used to describe the Hebrew scriptures. So you have Leshon Hediot and you have Leshon HaKodesh. Interesting. Hediot means a regular person, a non-Kohen, let's say, right? So Leshon Hediot, let's say, is a language of a commoner, okay, as opposed to Leshon HaKodesh. In rabbinic literature, Leshon Hediot appears in the sense of a binding text which is not scriptural. The text may have been established by the rabbinic court, such as a ketuvah, marriage contract, or contracts in vogue within the business committee. So, Leshon Hediot, you would have, for example, a contract for the ketuvah. That is not part of the sacred text of Israel. The ketuvah is not one of the canonized texts, obviously, so it's a Leshon Hediot, right? Or any similar type of agreement established by the Hachamim. The rabbis declared Dorshin Leshon Hediot. The language of a commoner as it appears in the contract may be interpreted by the court. That's very important. So Dorshin Leshon Hediot. I'm going to read now footnote 1. So you see the word Dorshin. It's a very important word. You make derasha on it, Leshon Hediot. But Leshon Hediot is not a sacred document, and you make derasha on it. Understand the point? I'm reading footnote 1. For the sources, see above, chapter 4, introduction, the expression Leshon Hediot, the language of a commoner, must be understood in opposition to Leshon HaKodesh, the language of scripture. That is, a binding text which is not scriptural. Interesting. Right. So the Leshon, meaning the Leshon Hediot, is a binding text. So on the one hand, it's binding because it's a contract and you signed the contract, but it's not a scripture. It's not part of the Chumash or the Nevi'im Ketuvim. The view of Tosafot, Bava Metzia 104, that this expression only involves obligations which were not instituted by the sages, is inaccurate, right? Right, because for example, the Ketuvah is the Leshon Hediot, but the Ketuvah was a takana instituted by the Hachamim. In rabbinic literature, the term Hediot, from the Greek idiote, doesn't, like, from where you get the English word idiot, which today is a pejorative, but back then it wasn't a pejorative. So it does not always imply a total absence of rank. It also implies lesser rank in opposition to higher rank. For example, you have Kohen Hediot in relation to Kohen Gadol. So you have the Kohen Hediot. Doesn't mean chas v'shalom that he's something negative. He's a Kohen. That's a ma'ala. But relative to the Kohen Gadol, he's less. Right. The same applies to idiota in Judeo-Spanish, which indicates lesser rank in relation to a higher dignity, rather than total absence of rank. So idiota in Judeo-Spanish doesn't mean an idiot as the pejorative English, but rather somebody of a lower rank. The fact that the ketuvah, marriage contract, an institution established by the rabbis, is referred to as Leshon Hediot, namely in the Yerushalmi and Ketuvot, proves conclusively that, contrary to the view of the Tosafot, this expression does not exclude rabbinic institutions. Right, so in this case, the point of the Tosafot was not accurate. Right. All right, going back now to the main text. Yes. Yeah. the precise meaning of this expression, namely Dorshin Leshon Idiot, was given by Ha'ayeh Gaon, referring to authorities who applied this principle to the interpretation of contracts. He wrote, all those authorities that were mentioned examined the language of the common, or Leshon Idiot, that they used in their contracts, and they interpreted Dorshim them as if they were analyzing the text of the Torah. Very interesting. You see what Rav Ha'ayeh Gaon says? You make a derasha on Leshon Idiot as you would make a derasha on the Leshon HaKodesh of the Torah. That's fascinating. They interpret Dorshin not in accordance with the literal sense, kifshutan, but in accordance with other interpretations. So when you make a derasha on the Torah, it's not the peshat always, right? So similarly, when you make a derasha on the Shetah, the Dayanim are not obligated to give it the peshat meaning. They can look at this various considerations to reach an interpretation that is not specifically the peshat. Okay. Continuing. The courts, and now this is not Rav Ha'ayeh Gaon anymore. The court's right to apply derasha to a document and interpret it in a non-literal sense is the effect of mesira, surrendering the contract to the court by its legal holder. Meaning, in order to be Dorshin Leshon Hediot, the litigants have to be mosrim the contract to the court, and at that point they have the right to make the derasha, right? So there's mesira. Most rabbinic legal authorities maintain that when the intention of the contract is doubtful, the court has the right to determine its sense even when contradicted by the text. That's very interesting. For this, and now footnote 4. For the sources on this point, see the B'Yisrael Yaakov Al-Ghazi, Ma'aneh Lashon. According to rabbinic jurisprudence, after issuing a decision, the judges may not explain what they had actually meant to say or interpret their wording in any arbitrary fashion. Rather, the sense of their decision would be determined, if necessary, by a different court according to the standard sense of their wording, right? So you can make a derasha on the text of the contract. Another court receiving the Pesach Din of the first court, which made a derasha on the text of the contract, would not be able to make a derasha on the Pesach of the Betin, but rather they would have to interpret the Pesach in terms of conventional meaning of words, or the sense of the meaning. Okay, that's an important point. Same way I wouldn't make derasha on Mishnayot. You can't make derasha on Mishnayot, right? I can make derasha on the Pesukim, or the Chachamim made derasha on the Pesukim. You don't make derasha on the Mishnah. Rather, the Mishnah you try to understand its conventional sense. All right. Moreover, if a term or expression appears to be superfluous, yitur lashon. So let's say you have an expression in the contract which seems to be a redundant word. It is the right of the court to expound it as it sees fit. In that case, the Hachamim, the Dayanim, they can make a derasha on that redundant term. Just like in the Torah, when sometimes you have a word that appears to be redundant, then they make derasha on that redundant word. Likewise, the rabbis declared that Moses surrendered, masar, the Torah to Yehoshua. Moshe kibel Torah mis-Sinai, umsaraha liYehoshua. And he to the elders, right? Etc. So there is mesirah of the text of the Torah. Hence, the right of the rabbinic court to apply derasha to scripture is based upon the fact that there was a mesirah of the scripture to the rabbinic court. Conversely, all may study Torah. Whosoever studies Torah, even if he is a Gentile, must be considered as holy as a high priest, right? That's the Gemara in Masechet Sanhedrin, Nun Tet. So even if a goy studies Torah, is considered, according to this Gemara, as a Kohen Gadol. But the rabbis warned not to surrender Mosrin, the words of the Torah, to a Gentile. That's different. You're not Moser to a Gentile. You're not going to have the Gentile interpret the words of the Torah. He doesn't have the lei mental. He doesn't have the michtav system. An alien may be able, an alien may be able to penetrate into a culture and master its peshat level. However, participation at the semantic level, in which the reader acts as an author, which is what derasha is about, presupposes the kind of relationship with the text which is not possible for the alien. The alien cannot partake in that. The alien, the ger, asher be'arsecha, cannot interpret the Torah. He can study at the Peshat level and understand it, and that's great, but that's it. More precisely, without the act of mesirah of the text to the reader, derasha is illegitimate. That's why, by the way, after Hatimat Talmud, all these derashot that they make on the Pesukim is just ludicrous. Sheva Shabbatot Timimot Tiena, therefore you can't say Kiddush Shavuot at night until it's Set HaKochavim according to Rabbeinu Tam. There's no basis for that. That's just, there are no derashot after Hatimat Talmud. What is the basis for you making a derasha? The Torah was not masul to us to make derashot. That's the Bet Din. I just had an interpretation for Sefirat HaOmer that because it says the Tosfos say that because it says Sheva Shabbatot Timimot Tiena, you have to do it right at sunset. Right at sunset. I mean, first of all, the explanation, the interpretation is, I don't want to say ludicrous, but what is the connection with the fact that it's Temimot and right at sunset? How does Temimot mean right at sunset? But then Temimot for Shavuot at night means after Set HaKochavim. I mean, this is not, it's Bitul Torah to even talk about that. Bechila, I'm sorry. That's silly. Yeah. All right. You understand? Temimot means right at sunset. Right? But no, Temimot means after Set HaKochavim. Well, I don't know, whatever. Elu va'elu nisrafim bevet hadeshen. Okay, let's leave it at that. Right, more precisely, without the active mesirah of the text to the reader, derasha is illegitimate. But this is universal. All the Chachamim understood, the Rosh, Rambam, everybody. I mean, it wasn't even a question, even among, you don't make derasha on the Pesukim of the Torah after Hatimat Talmud because the Talmud was the last Bet Din. That's it. Reflecting this idea, Rabbi Nissim Gaon dismissed the ta'awil, contradicting Jewish tradition, on the basis that ta'wil is the exclusive prerogative of the Jewish people. No, I mean, and certainly in terms of like interpreting the verses for non-halakha purposes, so we make derashot to be studied. But even that can only be done by a Jew, obviously, not by a Goy. No one has the right to formulate a ta'wil of the Torah against us, contrary to our consensus, because we are the authorities of its language, the transmitters of its text, and the proclaimers of its veracity. We have received it from the prophets verbally, directly, as well as its meaning in ta'awil. So a guy who doesn't believe in the Torah, he's going to tell us what the Torah means, with all due respect, right?